All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our video about the hiring process and all of the fun things that are involved in that. I am joined today by Marcy Bullock and Lori Powell. I'll let you both introduce yourselves.
All right, I'll go first. I'm Lori Powell, and I have 10 plus years of experience in human resources. I have experience in generalist field as well as some experience in employee relations. And I've also spent some years in recruitment. Most recently, I have been working as a staffing specialist with University Temporary Services at NC State. We're the in-house temporary staffing service for both North Carolina State University as well as UNC Chapel Hill. And in my current role, I fill a lot of the temporary positions on campus between both the locations. And then prior to that, I worked for a global company in Research Triangle Park, where I did some employee relations as well as some journalist work. And I do have my bachelor's degree from North Carolina State University with a bachelor's of arts in communication with a concentration in public relations. Then I also have my master's degree from North Carolina Central University in career counseling and placement. And I'm so excited to be here today.
Great, thank you.
Hi, TRIO students. My name is Marcy Bullock, and I serve as the Director of Professional Development here at NC State over in Pullen Hall in the Career Development Center. And I have been here for about 8 years. I teach 2 classes. I teach a career exploration seminar for any of you that are trying to decide what you should be when you grow up. And I teach a professional development class, which is for seniors transitioning to the work world and adulting, as we like to call it. And like Lori, I also have my bachelor's degree in communication, so we are similar on that. And then my graduate degree is in counseling as well. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. And yeah, so the theme of today's session, we're going to be talking about the hiring process and what goes on, what kind of documentation is needed, what does the interview look like, now in this world of, hey, a lot of this might be virtual, maybe how is that going to convert? So if the first question I have, so what's the role of a hiring manager in the interview process, and what are they typically looking for?
So the role of a hiring manager, and the hiring managers work alongside HR representatives or recruiters. So say, for example, in my role, I'm a recruiter and I work alongside the hiring managers and figuring out the essential functions of the position, what are some preferred qualifications, and then locating candidates based on that information. And so hiring managers, their role in the interview process is that they'll interview candidates. They're trying to have them to highlight their experience and their skill set or their education in relation to the essential functions of the position. And so we send over candidates in my role for that, but we want a hiring process to be fair and equitable. And so we make sure that as far as HR standpoint, that we make sure that that's taking place. And the hiring managers, what they really want to see is your skill set and how that relates to the essential functions of that position.
Yeah, and to expand on what Lori said, in a lot of cases, if you are applying for a job in a company, there would be your future boss, right? And that person would be making the final decision on whether or not they want to choose you amongst all the candidates that have applied. But in addition to that, there's someone that screens all of the resumes before they even get to your future boss's hands. And that's someone like Lori, who does that for our entire university. So if I had a job open, she would send to me maybe 15 resumes out of a stack of 50, and then I'd pick the 5 people I want to interview. And also I want to add in some of the career competencies that were developed by the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And they've identified what all employers are looking for, whether or not you're a STEM major or humanities or business, textile design, it's across the board. And I'm peeking at my notes just to make sure I don't forget one. So communication skills, critical thinking skills, technology, diversity and inclusion, leadership, professionalism, teamwork, and self-awareness. So if you kind of keep that in mind as you're going through your 8-semester plan and trying to develop your resume and build it so that you have all those, and then of course you'll have some really specific things for your major.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I just want to clarify something because I know you both were mentioning this. So when we talk about essential functions, what do we mean?
So that's going to be the requirements of the position. So you'll notice that they will have essential functions, minimum education and experience, and it could look something like a bachelor's degree or equivalent combination of experience. So that could be under minimal education and experience. And then some of the qualifications is what we have under essential functions in a position. That's the requirements of the position. And then there's preferred qualifications. So what the hiring manager is ideally looking to would be a great preferred qualification to look for.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a little wiggle room in the preferred because not everyone would have ideally all of the perfect matches. So I always tell students, like, apply if you think you're close. You don't have anything to lose. Throw your hat in the ring.
Yes, and preferred qualifications are just that. So they're just going to be preferred qualifications. The essential functions of the job, when you start looking at what are the requirements, that's what they're really screening off of, and that's what they're really taking into consideration. Preferred is just an extra bonus if you have it.
Cool. And so I'm curious what your experience has been interviewing and hiring candidates. Kind of like, what does it feel like to be on the other side?
So that's an interesting question that you asked me that. Because I have my master's degree in career counseling, University Temporary Services, we do a lot of outreach to some of our community partners. So we're engaged a lot in doing mock interviews, helping students prep for interviews and, being in the forefront with hiring managers and employers. But I would say that it's part of my daily task to interview candidates, and I really enjoy it. I'm a people person, so I enjoy engaging with people and having a chance to meet someone new. But I also have the aspect of understanding what the hiring manager is looking for. So I try to prep candidates as much as possible. So when it comes to the interview process, for example, I would send them an email. I'll let them know exactly who they're meeting with. The individual's name, what their title is, so they can understand where they fit within the organization, give them the job description, give them a link to the department's website so that they'll have time to prepare. We talk about the importance of preparing for interviews and showcasing yourself to that hiring manager and showcasing your skill set. So I have a lot of the coaching and career counseling piece all wrapped into HR. So I very much enjoy interviewing candidates, and it's something that's really important to me, as well as the career counseling piece of it too.
We always love having Lori come for the mock interview. She just mentioned that, and she'll help students practice who are taking part in some of the activities in the Career Development Center. And that's just such a safe place to make mistakes, to get feedback, and to learn about how you can really ace it when the job's on the line. So my role in hiring has been on a university campus. I've been on many search committees. And so that's a whole group of people who are screening the candidates, interviewing them, and then talking as a group to try to rank them. And then usually that person who would be your boss makes the final decision. So what you asked is a great question, Kyle, like, what does it feel like? To me, it feels hard because there's so many good candidates, and you look on paper and you just think to yourself, well, all these people went to an amazing university and they work really hard, and they have internships and they have the skills we're looking for. But then when you talk to them in person, that's where you get to feel like, how would it be to work with this person for 40 hours a week, spend more time with them than I do with my own loved ones? And that's where you're just trying to see, like, do I like this person? And so to me, my advice to you, TRIO students, is to be yourself 100%. Also, don't give me a reason not to pick you, because it's a very hard process, and make it as easy for me to see that you have the right qualifications and that I will enjoy working with you.
Yeah, and just to chip in a little bit too, being on a search committee, I was actually just asked to be one on yesterday. So it's when, especially in a university environment, but sometimes in a corporate environment too, it's often you might be asked, like, once you've been there for a little while, hey, would you mind being part of the search committee? Because the employer wants a good variety of people on that committee. So I feel like typically it's somebody from the office that would be working with, and then also maybe some other people who are in similar offices, sometimes a representative from human resources as well, just to give a nice, well-balanced range of opinions when looking at those candidates. Does that sound about right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what you want when you're thinking about a search committee. You want individuals who, would be working closely with the person hired. Also some perspectives from some, higher level individuals within that organization. And then it's always good to have HR involved in the process to make sure that things are happening fairly and equitably when we're talking about a recruitment process.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So let's talk about that whole process. Starting at the beginning, when a student is applying for a position. So we always kind of say, okay, make sure you have your resume, make sure you have your cover letter and everything. What to both of you goes into like a good resume and a good cover letter?
I'll go first. So when we're talking about resumes, I think it's really important to highlight your skills, your education, all those great things in relation to the position that you're applying for. And we always talk about like buzzwords. So let's say, for example, if the position is looking for someone who has QuickBooks experience or someone who has extensive Excel experience, highlighting that on your resume, making sure that those terms or that skill set is on your resume is definitely imperative. As far as cover letters are concerned, and Marcy could definitely speak to this some more too, but it's good to create a cover letter in relation to maybe some specific fields that you're interested in. So let's say, for example, if you're interested in an administrative assistant position, you could quickly turn around, and maybe take out the employer's name, put another employer's name in. You could have one as a rough draft that you could continuously use and build upon. The second and third paragraph in a cover letter is really meant for you to express why that particular position is of interest to you. You could showcase that you've done some research with that particular employer and you know that this particular organization is really what you're ideally seeking. And so for the TRIO students, what I would just recommend is doing your research on the organization that you're interested in, really showcasing that in your cover letter and showcasing your skill set in relation to the position in your cover letter is very imperative.
Yeah, well said, Lori. And I would add to that in the Career Development Center, we offer you help so we can critique your resume. It's really intimidating to think, how do I get everything that I've done on one sheet of paper in a way that's going to be persuasive? Is there a certain language? Are there some do's and don'ts? 100% yes to both of those questions. And one of the things that we offer, I'm going to just grab it here while I'm talking, is this career guide. Let's see. I think you can see it.
There we
and
go.
One is the you can either get a digital copy or a hard copy. This year will probably be digital, but I would recommend going to the Career Development Center website and looking at that guide, because then you can look at samples and like Lori said, really tailoring it to the job. I always tell students, the job description is your rule book. Follow the rules exactly. That's what they want. And then to expand with the cover letter, that's more your story. So that's where you don't repeat everything on your resume, but you can have a custom tailored personalized summary to a specific target market. So the one you send to SAS looks different than the one you send to RTI International because they have different missions and visions.
Yeah, and the something you were just saying, now it's lost me. It's always how it goes when you're trying to think of something clever. Well, okay, so let's continue on with that. So I have submitted my resume, I've submitted my cover letter, my application. Oh yeah, so there we go, some examples of what that might look like. And that's what I was going to say, is that there's no one perfect way to do a resume. And no one correct way it should be formatted, I feel like. My thing that I always tell my students is make sure it's readable. I as somebody who might have to look through a stack of 50 resumes, I don't want to spend all that time going through that, because I want to be able to find out, well, why are you the one qualified for this position? And I've always found the cover letter is the thing that helps out with that too.
Yeah, and Kyle, I'll just add to that. If you think about it, employers and hiring managers only spend about 30 seconds, believe it or not, TRIO students, 30 seconds reviewing a resume. And so you want to make sure it's something that's readable, like you mentioned, Kyle. So maybe having bullet points. I would recommend bullet points. It's just easier for the hiring manager to follow. easier for them to get a grasp and understanding of your experience. And then also in the application process, I think it's crucial to mention that you definitely want to include all of your work history and experience in the application process. The documents that are attached are just, documents that can be attached on top of the application, but the application is crucial that you mention that experience and include all of your work history in there and education as well.
Yeah, and like you said, Lori, just thinking about what is that employer looking for? The big mistakes that I see students make on their resumes, one thing is they'll put in like complete sentences with pronouns. And we suggest, like you said, the bullet point with the action verb, research, coordinated, advised. So that's one thing that students can do to make sure their resume is really strong. And then a lot of students ask, should I put in things from high school? And it really depends on what the job is looking for. If you learned a certain technique in high school, like Photoshop, and this job requires it, well, then absolutely, remember that's the rule book, put it in. But most often, by the time junior year comes, you'll have more at NC State through all of your experiences, and that's where you'll let go of all the things you did from high school.
Mm-hmm. Great, and so now let's continue on with that process. So I've submitted my resume, I've submitted my cover letter. Sometimes I might have to do a supplemental application. And I'm selected for, let's say, a first of 2-round interview. So what could I expect as an interviewee from that first round, typically speaking?
So let's say, for example, the first round is like a phone interview, and then the second round would be like a Zoom interview or in person. And I know with everything that's going on with COVID-19, Zoom is probably going to be more the case this go round. But I would say if it's a phone interview, what you could expect, and this is how we prepare our candidates with University Temporary Services, we would send you the job description, a link to the department's website, who you're meeting with, and what you can expect is for them to ask a series of questions. Now, I know that Marcy with the Career Center, they, as far as their mock interviews, we practice, behavioral questions. You can expect that a lot from employers, for them to ask you those types of questions. And you want it to be a fair process where you ask the same types of questions to every candidate. And so they would go through that. They would kind of get a feel for your experience. And then if you're asked to attend a second round interview, let's say if that's an in-person interview or a Zoom interview, they would probably dig deeper into the role, make sure that you have an understanding of the expectations of the position, and talk with you further and get more of a sense of your skill set in relation to the position as well. And that could also be a chance for you to talk with some individuals on the team. So like you were saying before, in those search committees, that could be an opportunity to do so as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Lori. Most of the interviews this fall 2020 are going to be virtual. And even all our career fairs have gone virtual. And students can, there's hundreds of companies coming to these career fairs in September. And you can actually sign up through an app called Career Fair Plus and get 10-minute slots with each person, which to me is like a mini interview, because it's not just like wandering around a career fair if you've ever been to one before. And I think with the virtual career fairs, it's really important, just like today, like we thought about what's behind us and we're in a quiet place and we thought about our eye contact. And, I even had some notes here that I glanced down at, so you can have all that for the virtual interview. And to expand on what Lori said about behavioral based, one of the things we suggest students do is remember the STAR method, which is situation or task, action, result. And whenever you get a question like that, such as tell me about a time that you had a conflict with your supervisor, how did you handle it? You describe the situation or the task that you had, you say what action you took, and always remember to say the result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always find that a good interview, I feel like I've had a good interview either with a candidate or with somebody who I'm interviewing for, when it feels almost like a conversation. Like, yes, there are going to be a lot of questions that are going to be asked, but it should feel a lot more natural rather than me just sitting here and answering a bunch of questions. I want to be able to make it feel like, oh, I'm just kind of pulling these things and can show that I've prepared ahead of time. But also maybe asking follow-up questions and knowing what kind of behind the question, what the interviewer is asking. I always find that really important. Okay, so cool. We've applied, we've got our interviews done. and now I am lucky enough, I interviewed well, I am offered the position. What does that look like?
So with University Temporary Services, if we're offering a role, we'll call you and we'll extend the offer. So with our positions, it may be a little bit different from my experience in working in the corporate world, and for other organizations, I think the processes may differ some. But for us, we're very upfront. Once we get a job order in, the hiring managers are very upfront about the range for the compensation. Let's say if it is a range, or if it's just flat out, $16 an hour, for example. So if it is a range, we'll have that conversation. We'll discuss it. If there's any negotiation in process, we'll talk about that. And I'm kind of like the middle person between the candidate and the hiring manager in the negotiation process, if there is one. And then we also make sure that they're aware that the actual offer is contingent on background check, things of that nature. And so that everybody's on the same understanding of the process. We explain what happens after that. We explain what happens once the background check comes back, how the hiring process works with the I-9, et cetera. So, we're very detailed, and we make sure that communication, I think, is very key. And that's what makes, hiring managers and HR professionals stand out. If they're able to communicate, get the candidate excited about the opportunity, communicate with them. I tend to over communicate in some ways, and I'm fine with that, but I want to make sure that they understand that that here's a process, this is what we have laid out for you. And we're excited about you joining the team, or we're excited about you joining this department. And we want to make it sure that they feel that way, because like you were saying, Kyle, with the interview process, it is a two-way street. You want to make sure that employer is someone that, something that you really value, somewhere that you really can see yourself fitting in at. And so it's important to think about the interview process as a two-way street too. So I just wanted to add that fact too.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that question, Kyle, because it's thinking so optimistically, like all of you TRIO students will get the offer, which is wonderful to focus on the positivity. And also just then there's like, whoa, this is intense. I got an offer. Should I say yes? Should I say no? How long do I have? And just remember, you do not have to decide on the spot. Hiring managers will give you some time to weigh possibilities. Sometimes it'll be like, let us know in a week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be. So that's where you take it all in. And maybe you want to meet with your career coach here in Pullen Hall. There's one assigned to every single college at NC State. So all you do is log into ePAC, schedule a time, and this fall it'll be virtual. And you can sit there and walk through the offer letter, all the details, the benefits, the salary. Is this competitive? Should I try to negotiate? So don't forget that you can have some time to ponder that and then make the right decision, because you don't want to renege and take it and then a week later say, oh, I changed my mind, because the company stopped interviewing at that point, accepting that you have said yes. And so that's an unethical thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to take into account. And definitely going over with somebody like what that offer looks like. I think it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, that's why we have the experts here. Just remember, students, like this is part of your fees, is there is a career coach assigned to you. So if you're in College of Sciences, it's Wes Wade. If you're in College of Engineering, it's Glenda Darrell. If you're in College of Business, it's Brian Newton. I could go on and on. This is a person here for you. So if you don't take advantage of those resources, you're just leaving that all on the table.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, I'll just add, Marcy and the team there at the Career Development Center, they are amazing. I would highly recommend that the TRIO students, that you take that offer up and have a chance to sit down and speak with one of the career counselors there, career coaches there. They are amazing. I used the Career Development Center when I was a student at NC State. And I just remember great things about that experience. And I did my internship with the Career Development Center when I was pursuing my master's degree program. So it's something that I think is so beneficial, and I would highly encourage you to check it out.
Great. So what maybe are some common myths that you find that applicants have about the hiring process, or maybe some common mistakes that they make?
So common myths, I would say that the actual resume has to be one page. Now that would be understandable if it's for an entry-level candidate, or if you're just, starting to gain some experience, that's totally fine. But if you are more if you have more experience and you want to showcase that experience in relation to the position, let's say if you have 10 years of admin experience and you're applying for an executive admin role and you really want to showcase that you have that years of experience, it's okay for it to be 2 pages. And in fact, you could just put on the header and the next page, you know, like Powell 2, so it shows that it's page 2 of the document if they were to ever print it off and it were to get lost. There's ways of formatting that if it's more than 1 page. I would say, you know, some common mistakes and things to look out for would be if there's any grammatical errors. So you want to make sure that you're reading over your resume, your cover letter. Let's say if you have a template cover letter where you're inputting different employers' names in there, making sure that you're not applying for a position and having NC State, and then you're really applying for a position at SAS, for example. You probably want to make sure that you're reading over that and being careful of that.
I've made that mistake before.
Those are some of the things that I would just add.
Yeah, let's be real. We've all made mistakes. So we're human, and that's why we're a work in progress. So no one's going to put a fork in us because we're not done and we're learning. So I'm so happy y'all are listening to this. I would add a mistake that I see some students make in the hiring process is putting all their eggs in one basket and just going, I'm applying for my dream job and that's it. Well, right now with COVID-19, I'm recommending to students that they have parallel plans. Like maybe this was in January what you thought you'd be doing in summer of 2020, but it's not now because the economy has taken a downturn. So I would recommend that you apply for lots of positions. And I actually did a podcast interview on this with Lindsay Pollock, and she wrote the New York Times best-selling book called From College to Career. And in my podcast, which can I shamelessly plug that, Kyle?
Yeah,
okay. It's called Wolfpack Career Chat. So you can subscribe on Spotify or iTunes and SoundCloud. And basically what Lindsay said in that interview was you need to apply to as many positions as possible and take something. It may not be your dream job, but if you can learn and you see it as a place to advance and springboard in the future, then take it. And I've seen some of my May 2020 grads do that because times have changed for all of us. So we all have to pivot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, I think I've made that mistake when I was initially applying of, I can only, because my degree was in education. So I was like, I can only apply for this kind of position. But then I started thinking, well, no, I'm qualified to do a lot of other things. And inevitably got a job outside of what I was initially looking for, which ended up got me here eventually. I know one of the things that I've done, I did not review the position before I interviewed for it. So I had gotten a really cool interview for a position. It was out in like California, and I was like, oh, cool. I might get to like move out that way. That'd be awesome. And I was so excited for like just getting to interview it that I didn't re-look at the application and see what they were talking about, what we were talking about earlier, like the essential functions and everything. And the first question they asked is, what excites you about the job position? It's like, I don't know exactly how to answer this because I haven't looked at it. And that could have been very different if I had just looked at it really quickly beforehand.
Yeah, Kyle, I'm glad you shared that story. And I want to add that our libraries here have so many resources to help you be an expert on the company you're going to interview for. So let's say you have an interview coming up at Research Triangle International. Well, obviously you're going to Google it and you'll be like, what does RTI say about themselves? But in addition to that, what does the Triangle Business Journal say about them? What does the Wall Street Journal say about them? So then at the end of the interview, you can ask really intelligent questions and not be stuck in that situation where you're like, I'm not really sure what you do. What do you guys do again?
And I just want to mention something too, Kyle and Marcy. I completely agree. I would say that researching the organization is truly important to do that. And I would say a lot of times hiring managers start off with just that question. How did you hear about this position? What interests you about this position? And you want to be capable and able to answer that. With all that being said, we all make mistakes. I have made mistakes plenty of times in the interview process and so forth and so on. And so you learn for those things. And And like Marcy was saying, I definitely encourage the TRIO students to look into these resources. There's tons of resources available on campus, and we're here to help and help you in your career search and in your journey.
Yeah, and plus what that does, if you're that candidate, let's say they interviewed 5 people, they all look good, but you were resourceful enough and took that initiative to go the extra mile to really dig into what's in the pipeline at that company. What are some of the future challenges they're going to have? And you ask about that. That's going to set you apart from all the other candidates, and it's going to show what kind of employee you'll be. You're not going to be a sloppy, lazy employee. You're going to be one that goes the extra mile.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I'll also add asking questions at the end. That is something that's really, really important. A freebie question could be, what's the next steps in the process? When employers ask, do you have any questions for me? You don't want to not ask anything. Let's say if they answer every single question that you had written down. You just want to showcase it. Like, hey, I have some questions, prepared. It looks like you went through all that. I only have one more question remaining. What's the next steps in the process? So it shows that you're engaged, that you're interested in the position. It could be like, what does a typical day look like? Or how many, cases, or what was the workload going to look like? Things of that nature, and making sure that you're asking appropriate questions in relation to the position. But it does show the hiring manager that you do have an interest in it. And it's not just a one-sided conversation and dialogue like we were talking about before. This opens the opportunity for the hiring manager and the candidate to have a conversation, a more free-flowing conversation where they can answer any questions that you may have.
And one other thing on the podcast is episode 5. We talk about 5 key questions to ask the employer on Wolfpack Career Chat. So if you're still like, I wonder what I should ask other than what's the next step, take a listen to that. It's only about 5 minutes.
Great. And that actually goes nicely into our last official question. So what kind of things should an applicant be looking at? We've talked a lot about what the employer is looking for, but what about for the applicant? What kind of things are they looking for in an interview? And maybe are there any kind of like red flags or maybe half-mast red flags that they should be looking out for?
I would say the applicant should be looking for, can they see themselves, fitting and feeling good about accepting an offer within that organization? Is that position something that they're really interested in? Like I said before, the interviewing process is a two-way street. You want to have a chance to engage with the employer and get more of an understanding of the role, the company's culture, things of that nature. A lot of stuff you can find on the website, but once you're finally in there for the interview, you can start getting a feel for things. I would say some red flags, just making sure that it's a legit organization and company. And then also I would say, looking out for things in patterns, such as, is the reason why this position's open because they've had high turnover, that people are constantly leaving that role. Some of those things you want to be mindful of. And if that's the case, you probably have some follow-up questions where you just want to get more of an understanding as to why that is the case.
Yeah, that's such a good question because it kind of depends on each candidate and what their values are. I always like to have students think about what their deal breaker is. And what I mean by that is like, what is the thing that would be a reason why you absolutely, even just like in dating, if you're looking for, a romantic partner, like this is a deal breaker if you smoke or whatever it could be. But in the work world, it's the same way because it's kind of like my deal breaker might be I have to leave at 5 p.m. each day because I have a dog at home and this dog relies on me for food and going out. So that's going to be it. Not saying I won't work at home sometimes, but I have to leave at 5. So you have to really be clear on what your expectations are. That being said, in the earlier breath, I said, don't be too picky. What I would say, in addition to what Lori said, is she talked about the company's reputation, and I would add 2 other things to that. Company has a good reputation. I think I can get along with the people I'll work with, meaning it's not a toxic atmosphere. And then the last one is, will I learn something? And honestly, like with this job market, even if you can get one of those 3, grab it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really good to think about, will I learn something? And we could do a whole other thing about professional development and things like that. And it's a good way for maybe an applicant early on to think like, okay, well, what am I going to take from this position? And sometimes a an applicant thinks like, okay, I'm only going to be at this position for maybe a year or two, but end up really enjoying the position because they get to grow in the position or because they get other opportunities. And so that might even be worth asking too, is what, beyond just like my first 6 months or whatever, like what other kind of opportunities are here for growth, or for working with other departments, or however that might be structured. Again, it really does depend on the kind of company that you're applying to, or if you're applying to, say, like a public university or a public state position or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that I want to reiterate what you just said, Kyle, because it's really important, because sometimes people just look at the entry level offer, but the advancement could be really quick. And I have an example of a student who is a statistics major, and they took a job with the federal government, and all their friends were taking a job at like maybe 5,000 or more a year annual salary. And you can find out the average starting salaries for your major by looking at the NC State surveys. So she was kind of like, wow, I'm taking this job with the federal government. It was actually at the FBI, and all my friends are making more in private industry. Well, 2 years after they all graduated, she had already surpassed them, because the federal government had such a quick promotion process, performance review process, where she moved from like a GS7 to a GS9, and boom, so you don't see that when you first take the offer. And that's why I'm really glad you brought that up about promotions and advancement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would say definitely weighing your options and thinking of long term, where could you potentially see yourself within that organization? And so I think that's great. Even asking questions like for me, for example, professional development is something that's so important and so key to me. So I wouldn't hesitate at the end to ask, some questions about, what professional development opportunities does your organization offer? And what I'm looking for that is, will I be able to expand upon my knowledge in human resources? Will I be able to, attend webinars or attend conferences and get the latest and greatest information? Because I think from a professional standpoint, no matter what field you're in, it just helps you to expand upon your knowledge and be even more great in your role. And I think it's so critical and so key, but I think that is a great point that both of you mentioned.
Great. Well, that's the last of my official questions. I want to leave the floor open if there's anything that either of you want to add or promote, or anything last minute advice that you would give to the students.
I would just say, please utilize your resources. The Career Center is here. I believe the library is here. There's other resources available on campus. And I just wish the TRIO students great success. And if there's anything that you need, please utilize those resources. I'm also extending myself, and I'm available, so you could share my contact information. If anybody has any questions, I would be more than happy to assist as well.
Wonderful. I'm going to end with the piece of advice: stay safe, wear your mask.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you both so much for taking some time out of your day. And I'm sure the students will probably be reaching out at some point. Otherwise, let us know if you have any other questions, and feel free to reach out to the other TRIO staff as well.